So hi everyone, it's MOvember 2020 and it's day 29. So we're nearly at the end and I am looking at yoga and its benefits, and I've got Laurin Vassella here, and Laurin runs Bend It Like Buddha, which is how an Australian says it. I think it's Buddha if you're going to say it like Laurin will. Don't get me started on tacos. One of the things, I'm a trauma therapist, and Laura and I went to for my own therapy for yoga to help with complex PTSD. And I have had a few injuries. So today I wanted to interview you, Laurin, to talk about what's it, if I step out of my therapy hat and just step into just being a guy who's 56 years old, 3 kids, tired, works for himself, and I had a frozen shoulder that's sort of migrated to the other one, and I needed help, right? And so the caveat for me is also, and I'm going to mention this book at the end, but there's a book that I recommend for clients that's Overcoming Trauma Through Yoga. And I know that, Laurin, this isn't a book you've read, but you have worked with the human body for a long time, and you know the benefits of yoga. So my first question to you would be, for guys, for MOvember, someone thinking about increasing their health and well-being, why choose yoga? What's good, would be good about it for them?
I suppose, thank you, Steve. I suppose that there's no wrong time to start. I mean, yoga was a system that was actually designed by men, for men. And it just got taken by women because they loved it, and then it became this whole household trend. And but the system itself was designed for the male body, and the poses are aligned for what you need to be back healthy. And so I'll talk to 2 aspects of why yoga is good, especially as you age. So for the physical aspect, our bodies are mostly made up of water. And as we get older, the water decreases. And so that's why babies look so pliable, like they're so squishy, and their spines are so straight. If you ever look at a toddler sitting, and you'd know with your kids when they're little, they just sit so beautifully straight, and they couldn't even bend it if they wanted to. Yeah. But and now as we get older, that water, especially in between your vertebrae, your disc, it just starts to squish down with time. And so when you wake up, you'll be the tallest that day. And when you go to bed, it tends to just go down. And if we sit at desk jobs, or if we do anything that just helps decrease that water, it's gonna keep dwindling. And what yoga does is just move it. It moves it around. And we all know what water looks like if it's been sitting for too long. If you think of like a pond or a swamp or something, it sits, and that's where things like injuries and tension and stuff can form. And it tends to, for most people, form in similar places and on similar sides of the body. Yours was unique because it swapped, same injury, but it swapped. So you can kind of relate to, that it can show up the same way. And so what we tend to do with your practice is to move the body so that the water starts moving and shifting. And it sits in your connective tissue and your fascia, which is like all the musculature and how it moves and glides upon itself. And if it can't glide, it gets stuck, and that's where you get tension and knots and issues. And if they stay for too long, they can form into something else that can happen. So it's just a safe way to almost come back in and get things shaking, I suppose, so that it can start to release and have an exit route. And within your tissues, because if you sit in a shape for a certain amount of time, you know this, when you're sitting, you get stuck. You feel like you're just kind of stuck in that shape. If you're sitting in a forward bend, or as you know, I'll put you in them and keep you for a while, it starts to feel different. So the one you start with is not the one you end with, because your body wants to help you, it wants to reform, but it often just needs to know that you're staying there for a while. So in yoga, we do try and just create the patterns that help everything clear out of your body so it just works better. So that's one of the big benefits as you're aging. The second is your bone density. So when you reach 30, you're at your max bone density at that point. So your bones are just tissues that kind of form and reform, same way as we were talking about your connective tissues. But what yoga does is help exacerbate that. So it helps it keep going. And so if it's not going, that's when you're more prone to things as you age, like osteoporosis and things like bone sickness. So that's another massive benefit for aging. And it comes up more in men than anyone else for that. So yeah, any questions about the physical before we go into the mental?
No, look, I think I know that, like you were saying, when you start a move, like you'll put me into a pose and it's stiff, and then it does sort of change shape. I really like what you're saying there, like what the move you start in is not the move you end up with, and how
Yeah.
important that is. And I know one of the things I find helpful being there with you is that there's that reminder to be gentle and have
Yeah.
some acceptance, which is, I think, what you're going to go into now about talking about the mental aspect, because
Yes.
um,
Yeah.
a lot of what I deal with people that have experienced trauma, something that's a real feature is an inner critic or an outer critic. And so I know when I'm there, I've always got to battle that inner critic, and it's really helpful to get that instruction just to be kind and to be sort of have that radical acceptance about where you're at. And,
Yeah.
and what you've got that day. Like one of the things I've heard you say regularly is that phrase, like just what you've got today, because you might have been either more flexible or it was easier a week ago, but for some reason today this is, so work with what you've got right now. But yeah, tell us some more about the mental aspects and how it might help somebody.
Yeah. So even just feeding onto that. So there's no such thing as perfect health. You know, we see, even like as a yoga teacher, I ache sometimes too. Like there's no such thing as waking up and just feeling like everything is perfect. And so in that sense, your yoga sits and just working with the body you woke up with. So in one of the ways I see it with you, when I put you in a shape, and I know it's a shape that's not easy for you to be in, and now we're coming into the breath, is your ability to breathe into it. Yes. So when you start learning how to breathe, you can change your entire inner world. It will naturally shift. So when we breathe into our belly, we activate our vagus nerve, and so it can calm down our nervous system. And it's one of those things that can repattern and stick. So I had another student who she came into, it was her very first yoga class, and she came in with a stoma bag. She basically just walked out of the hospital and came straight into a yoga class. She just had surgery a week ago on her stomach, and it was a stoma bag is the fluid is coming out of your stomach into this bag, and she had a frozen shoulder. She couldn't move one of her arms, so it was very similar. And she came 5 times a week, did what she could. We made lots of modifications. And this is where coming to a class is so important, because the teacher can actually work with the body that you brought and make it a safe place for you to work in it. Because if you're doing ones online, but they don't know you and they don't know what's going on, they don't know what your mental history is like, they don't know what your physical history is, and they're just giving you generic things that you might resonate with or you may just hate, and you may form this relationship with yoga, thinking that that's what it should look like, when traditionally it was done one-on-one for 5,000 years. It's only been in the last 100 years it's in a classroom setting because the sheer demand for it. But it's a personal practice. You need to have that relationship with the teacher that can actually help the body you're in, and it will help you get better so much quicker.
And
beside that, this lady had a lot of scans, and she used to get really bad anxiety when she'd go to these scans, and they'd know she was coming from a mile away, and there was all this dread, and she would end up walking out of MRIs several times before she could actually finally sit and do one. And after she'd been coming for about a month, she went and did an MRI, and it was swimming. Like, she went in, she did her MRI, and she came out, everything was calm, and the whole staff was just waiting for her when she walked out of this, and they were like, what happened? What changed? Like, we were waiting for you all day. We anticipated the drama that came with your MRI. And she said, I learned how to breathe.
Yeah, there you go.
And so it was something that stuck. She did her yoga breathing, and so it was this learning how to breathe into your body forms a bridge that forms this connection that your body is an okay place. Your body is still taking breath. Your systems are still working. You can come in and start working in these areas that do love you and do want you to be in that space and do want to support you. And our bodies are naturally inclined to bring us back to health constantly, no matter what we throw at them. Like whether we have addictions or whether, if anything that happens, it tends to be that if we step away from that, our bodies repair. They're really intelligent systems. And so our ability to sit and breathe can be something that It reconnects with what's happening inside, and nothing can do, I mean, like we were saying before, it's, you can talk about it until you turn blue, but until you start coming in and experiencing it, it can be different. And one of the ways I noticed that a position's uncomfortable for you is you stop breathing. And so it's something like, I'll say, close your eyes and breathe, you know, close your eyes and breathe. You probably hear me say it all the time, because it's so important. And sometimes you do just need those reminders of, you know, close your eyes and breathe.
Well, that's I was thinking both those things, and the idea that when I stop breathing, I don't know I'm doing it. And so it's speaking into two things, I suppose. I got a feeling that we're in the middle of a big storm, and I know you are too. But I was just looking at I think we've just had a branch come down on the roof of our house. So if the screen goes blank, we know what's happened. That idea, like, there was two things that you said, because it's so much is online now, especially in the COVID-19, and God bless, and that's great that there's options, right, for people. But I know for me, if I come there, I would never have the discipline to do an hour of yoga on my own. I know some people do, and I understand that as not just laziness, because I'm quite a hard worker. I understand it as, I don't like going into my body. It feels like a bad neighborhood, right? And so there's that, especially with complex PTSD survivors, just getting into their body's hard. So having someone there, if you're in person and it's one-on-one, so there's not the public shame of others seeing you not being able to do it well or whatever, like getting a personal instructor means you can get someone that can help you. And then, like you said, is another set of eyes outside, that if you see the breathing stop or whatever, it's just a kind reminder to just breathe into it and be present. And I know that is like, just hearing you say that out loud, and to know that you notice that, of course you do, but it is a real benefit. And I think that it would be something I'd recommend to anybody to go and try it, because I know I've got a young family, and I thought I don't want to lose flexibility. And there was an old and he was old, he was 72 at the time, but he was incredibly fit, and he started yoga in his 50s because he didn't want to get older and be unwell. And he was 72, and he was in remarkable shape, and he was a really healthy guy. He was a Gestalt therapist. Some of my audience would know it. There's a guy called Yarrow Starrick, and he was I just sort of thought, wow, and it always stayed with me, but it took me, you know, a while before I got started myself. So I wanted to do this video today with you to encourage people to come in person, to not be afraid. That the personal touch is really important, because there's I've had 2 frozen shoulders since I've been coming to yoga, and everything's had to be modified. And I know that when I did do a couple of things online, I had to do those modifications on my own, and I don't know what I'm doing, right? But when I come and you're not only just modifying it, you're actually creating a move that I can actually do that adds benefit. I'm not just avoiding something, I'm doing something that I'm benefiting from.
Yeah.
Well, I suppose just last thoughts, things for you around, from what I've said, or be leading into us finishing up. Yeah,
no, I think I was just going to say with your practice, because a lot of it's designed to also remind you, like, when we're injured, we do often sit in that injury space, and your practice, and what I try and do with you especially, is to remind you what you can do. Like, there's so much that can still be done, and there's still connection work that can happen, regardless, you know, around the injury. We can support the injury, and we can hold the space for it, but to really come back into a good place in your body, you know, so the good neighborhood areas, and you know, just reforming that relationship. But the other thing too, especially like with your 3 young boys, is that yoga is I've heard so many times over the years, I can't do yoga, I'm not flexible enough. And I'm like, that's why you should do it. You know, like, you're the prime candidate for it. You shouldn't be flexible if you're doing it. You should do gymnastics if you're flexible, and not yoga. So, and I thought, you know, people measure it of, you know, I can't touch my toes, or I can't do, you know, any of these fancy poses. But where it should sit is your ability to live easier, your ability to play with your kids better, your ability to walk around the shops without getting achy knees, or carry your groceries into the house. Like, it should translate more functionally. And that's when, you know, it's starting to repattern and stick.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So lots of benefits, and as well with the breathing. I know we touched on that, but the mind settling, it settles with the breath. The breath is one of the best ways to get into the mind. And in yoga, there's these systems called the kramas, and where your yoga sits in different stages of your life. And in the stage that we're in, this middle-aged stage, your breathing is where it sits. Like that's where the magic is, because most people are busy, and it's they have, you know, really active lives. They have people to take care of, you know, maybe above and below. And breathing is such a quick way to reset yourself, and it works. You know, it's when you get older, when you get into your 80s, 90s, that meditation really forms a bigger part of your practice. But right now, it's just getting you there healthy, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the practitioners that I've followed is a guy called Stephen Porges, and he wrote the polyvagal theory. And he like, the main takeaway from that book was, if you've got complex trauma, regulating your breath tricks your amygdala into thinking you're calm if you're calm, right? But first responders and that use that too. So really, but I know when I would just try and practice breathing without connecting it to the body, it always seemed to short circuit its benefits, right? So I think what yoga does is really, it gets you to open up the space to breathe into, and that for trauma people, I think, would be really helpful. So
Absolutely. And it's a really gradual process, I think, with trauma, because it's something that can't be rushed. It's something you really have to be gentle with. And that's why I think the personal practices really accommodate that, because if you're going into a full halt class, you might come into poses that really are confronting and don't feel right. And you wouldn't have that in a personal setting. So it's a much safer place to even just begin. And then your bearings, and then maybe go out into the world. But it's especially for trauma patients, I think it's highly important to start in a personal setting.
Like you said, then, because I think safety is the other thing. It's the other component when people are reaching out for therapies. They're quite frightened, right? And some of them don't have a voice. So in a public setting, they're unlikely to exercise a voice, but one-on-one, it's going to give you more of an opportunity to allow, like, the teacher to see, like you do with me, and remind me to breathe when I'm not tuned into myself. I just think it just hearing you say that is another reason why to get someone one-on-one for a while before you're ready for a class, so you can make sure you feel safe, you know.
Absolutely.
Well, Laurin, I want to again thank you. And where can people find you? So if they watch this interview, and how do we look you up?
So I'm bendityoga.com.au. It's BENDIT yoga.com.au. I'm located in Pymble, and actually close to Steve there. And I have a very small space because I do like personal practices. I've kept with that tradition here. And within this space, so at the moment, especially with COVID, I can only take 3 in a class. But I think for trauma survivors, again, I think one-on-one is the best way to start. And my background, I used to work in hospitals as well as an exercise physiologist. So working through the body, and then I became a yoga teacher after that. And I've been teaching for a long time. But it's a great place to be. This area is beautiful, and I'd love to work with you if you're looking to start.
All right. Well, look, thank you, and I'll sign off and say bye.
Thank you, Steve.
Bye.
See you soon. Bye.